Let's talk about directed sessions today. That's our topic for today's voiceover huddle on YouTube. My name is Mike Hathcote, and I'm a full-time professional voiceover talent. Been doing so since the 90s. Author of the book, The Voiceover Blueprint, which you can get for less than $10, the audio book version and the digital download for less than $10, plus 4 free gifts with the link below. Go ahead and like and subscribe in the like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and then also chime in on the chat so that we can do some shout outs here in a few minutes. And also don't forget to check out Dr. Boehner Parker's class on mindset, which is backed by popular demand, half price if you use the code mindset50. Also the link in the description for that. And one last thing before we get into the topic today, if you're a Blueprint member, which I know several of the people on this chat, not chat, what is this live feed are. I've just posted the monthly fake audition in the in the Facebook group. So hop over to Facebook and deliver your best read and share it. You will win, or you could win, um, an audio video demo for that read for your reel. So we do that once a month in the VoiceOver Blueprint Facebook group. Okay, let's talk about directed sessions. First of all, what is a directed session? For those of you who might be new, a directed session really is just like what it sounds. It's when someone is directing you for your read. Many times that's done via things like, Zoom or Skype or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, something like that. Any meeting app, free meeting app, those are usually used. Another big tool that is used for directed sessions is a tool called Source Connect. And that is a specialized piece of software that allows you to connect remotely to an engineer in a studio somewhere else where they actually record on their side and you're just recording in your booth. You're just doing your read. You're not having to record anything on your side. They are recording everything there. So Source Connect is a great tool for that. There's also a newer piece of software. I believe it's called Connection Open. I've never used it, but it's kind of a newer tool that's out there. But so that's another option for you if you want to have that direct connection to a studio where they record. If you've never done a directed session, they can be a little nerve-wracking, especially when you're new, because you're here, you've got your script, and you've got a number of people, one to who knows how many, listening while you're recording live, and they're giving you feedback on the tone and the speed and the style of your read, and it can be a little intimidating when you first start doing it, but the more you do it, the better it gets. I wish every session was a directed session, to be honest, because it takes all the guesswork out of the recording. There's no back and forth. There's no you sending the file, they send it back saying, hey, can you do it this way or that way? It's just once you're done, you hang up, send them the file, or they already have the file if you're using Source Connect, and you're done. Love it. So this is something that until you actually do it, it's kind of hard to practice for. However, it is a good idea if you're in some sort of a training program like the VoiceOver Blueprint, where every Thursday we actually have a performance call led by Mary Winkle, who is not only a full-time voice talent, she's also an on-camera talent. And she sometimes chimes in here, so we'll see if she's in today or not. But it's nice to be able to kind of practice on that because, it's similar to a directed session in that you're reading your script. There's a number of people listening at the same time, and one or more people giving you feedback. And so that's what our Thursday night webinar is in the Blueprint, Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. Pacific, where she brings a script, or you can bring your own script, and you read that out loud and get feedback on how to do the best performance possible. And so that's about the closest thing that you can do to actually simulate a real directed session. But it's better to practice on one of those than when it actually happens, the real thing. right? So you get a bunch of those out of the way, and that just kind of preps you for the real thing when it actually comes around. So if you are in a group like that, make sure you participate in those kinds of calls so that you can actually, knock off the cobwebs before the real thing happens. They can be a little hairy. I think I remember what about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I read the story in my book about that crazy directed session that I had where there were people on different continents and there were translators and stuff like that for that video game. That was nuts. That was the craziest directed session I've ever had. They're usually not that bad, but the more you do them, the better it gets. Now, when it comes to products like Source Connect, it's not free like Zoom and all the other ones are. It's 35, I believe it's $35 a month to subscribe, or you can pay for it all up front. I believe it's, I don't know, 6, 7, $800 all at once. I choose to just do the monthly, and that way I know I've always got the most updated version. But sometimes there are people who will, or not people, there are agencies and rosters who will require that you have Source Connect before you even get added to their roster. They want to know that you're a professional and that you're ready if someone does require a Source Connect session. And they will usually tell you that in the description of the job. So when they send out an audition, all the specs in there, when the script and everything, they'll say if it requires a Source Connect session. So what you could do, if you don't want to just go ahead and spring for it up front and you're not worried about some of the rosters that actually require it, just wait until you get a job that requires it. Then you can spring for it. Since I do so many of them, I just, you pay monthly and you just always have it. Um, Cost of doing business. There are some months I'll go a whole month without using Source Connect because they wanted to use Zoom or some other different platform. And that's fine. I just leave it, on auto renew or whatever, and it just bills me $35 a month. But I'd rather not need it and have it than to need it and not have it because I do so many of them. If you're brand new, you may not have that many opportunities to use it. So it'll be up to you as to whether or not you want to go ahead and spring for it or wait until you get a job that requires it. So your call on that. So that's a directed session. And like I said, I wish they were all directed sessions. It would make my job so much easier, but it is what it is, right? So hopefully you'll have a chance to do one of those soon if you haven't already. And if you have, go ahead and chime in on the chat. Let me know if you had a good experience, a bad experience, and we can chat about it. All right. Okay, let's see who's in. Ding, ding, ding. There's Ron from Grand Haven, Michigan. First one in today. And there's David from Hamilton, Ontario. And good morning to John in Denver. And there's Sean in Longview. Boomer McBoom from San Emilio Mountains, California. There's Nancy in Yankton, South Dakota. All the regulars are here. There's Sarah from Kentucky. Good morning to you. There's Wayne in Port Orchard. Mark from Montreal. There's Emmy Doll from North Phoenix. Loved your Insta postings with Tony Hawk. Thanks. Yeah, for those of you who weren't on yesterday, I had Tony Hawk come to my house on Friday to do some skating. That was fun. There's Edward from Jacksonville, Florida, and David from New Orleans. There's Jason from Kearney, Nebraska, and there's Celeste from Newark, Delaware. There's Callie from Pasco, Washington. John in Atlanta, where the players play. There's Joy. Good morning, everyone, from sunny, cold Southfield, Michigan. There's Becky from Michigan. She says, as I get older, I love being told what to do. Don't like doing things more than once. Want to get it right the first time, right? And that's exactly why those directed sessions are so good. I love them. And by the way, because there are scheduling and things involved with directed sessions, you can usually charge more for your services if you're having to do a directed session because, there's a lot more time involved. You can't just do it on your own time. You have to do it at a specific time at this, and so typically directed sessions, you can charge more. So that's always nice. There's Kirk from Greenville, South Carolina. Tracy moving forward from Rochester, Minnesota. Good to hear it, Tracy. There's Dennis from Pasadena and Chris from Lakeville, Michigan. I'm sorry, Minnesota. And there's Doug from Greensboro, North Carolina. And there's Andrew from Latvia. JR from Austin, Texas. Wayne says, are you the standard 35 a month or 650 for perpetual license? Perpetual meaning one-time fee forever. I said mentioned before that I do the 35. I do the monthly just because I want to make sure that I have the most updated version of it every time they do an update. And if you've got that continuous renewal, it just keeps on keeping on. So that's what I do. There's Bob from Wadsworth, Ohio. That's a good point. Okay. Chip says, at the end of almost every directed session I've done, I've asked myself, why was I so freaked out about that? Yeah, exactly. You can get a little nervous, leading up to it, especially once again, if you're brand new, having one. I mean, I've had as many as like 12 people on there listening to me, and that can get a little hairy because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. They start arguing and discussing, well, we're going to do it this way, or maybe do it that way, or it's pronounced like this, or it's pronounced like that. That can get a little frustrating, but usually it's more like 3 or 4 people who are giving you the feedback, and that's a little more manageable. But yeah, you're right. It's once you're done, you're like, what was the big deal? Why was I so nervous? John says, and they write on them things like every day. I don't understand what you're talking about there. Sorry. Chris says, is video part of Source Connect or is it an audio feed? Important to have professional looking background like you have. No, it's only video. And that's a good point. I'm glad you raised that, Chris. It is only audio. So you don't have to worry about looking pretty or anything like that. But if you're using something like Zoom or Google Meet or Skype or Microsoft Teams or something, those are video based. Now, if you don't have a fancy schmancy booth or, a fancy background or, whatever, just turn your camera off. Nobody's expecting to see you. They just want to hear you. So if you're not comfortable being looked at while you record or whatever, just turn your camera off. And if they have their camera on, and want to see you or whatever, just say, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't have a camera in my booth, you know? So not necessarily video on, or not at all video on Source Connect. Strictly an audio interface. Rich says, how often should we test our equipment before a directed session? Well, hopefully, if you've been doing work, your equipment is functional and fine. Now, some people, when they first get on Source Connect, they will test with another Source Connect user to make sure that everything is, set up correctly and, you're hot. Also, this kind of goes back to our internet discussion a while back. If you can, if it's at all possible, Source Connect prefers a hardwired connection. So no Wi-Fi. I mean, I think it'll work on Wi-Fi. It's just a little bit less reliable. So they tell you if you can do it, make sure that you're hardwired for Source Connect. But as far as testing your equipment, I don't know about testing your actual equipment in your booth, but I would actually test to make sure that your Source Connect connection is good. And all you would have to do there is just find another Source Connect user, connect just to make sure everything goes back and forth, and you're good. Also, make sure you do use headphones on Source Connect. You don't want to have any kind of feedback. Something about Source Connect's interface or the way they have it set up. You can't just there's a lot of feedback if you don't use headphones. So you wanna make sure you're hearing the people talking to you just in your ears so that there's no bleed through into your microphone. John says, "I miss the old days, going to their studio, everything directed live and waiting while they silently discuss your performance behind the glass," right? Yeah, that is the old school way of doing it, but, I mean, the internet completely destroyed that paradigm. We can do it all from where we are, as long as you do have quality setup. Remember, that always goes back to that whole thing about getting your booth dialed in by an engineer, because the last thing you wanna do is get on a directed session and then have them talking about why your sound isn't right, you know? That would be hugely embarrassing. So, make sure that all that is dialed in first before you even start auditioning for jobs that could possibly be directed. Sarah says, "Not sure if John is serious or kidding. That description sounds very intimidating." No, that's the way it was. You go to their studio, you're in the booth, they're behind the glass listening, and you can't hear them unless they actually talk back to you, like hit the button and actually talk back to you in the booth. So sometimes you're recording and then, they say, "Okay," and you stand there and you just wait and you see them in there talking and discussing whether or not they want to do it this way or that way, and they give you the feedback. Hopefully everything's cool and they just say, "Sounds great." You leave or you hang up if you're on Source Connect, and you get paid. David says, "Connected by IDB wait, IPDRL." I think you mean, what was that called? I don't think it's not that. It's an old antiquated, telephone line connection. I think it's IPDL, maybe not. I don't know. Never used it. That's old school. It's like a dial-up. That's like a, dial-up connection. It's a whole thing. But now that internet is fast and no more dial-up, it's so much better. IPDTL. That's right. IPDTL. And then there's also, yeah, John says ISDN. That's another connection. But once again, you don't have to worry about any of those. Those are all old school. Don't even worry about it. If you've got an internet connection, hopefully a direct, hardwired internet connection, you should be good to go. Dan says, "Didn't Don LaFontaine have a limo to get around the studios in the day?" Yeah, he was so busy. And by the way, for those of you who don't know who Don LaFontaine is, he's the guy who kind of coined the whole video, or I'm sorry, the movie trailer, voice of, "In a world," that kind of a deep, heavy bass, he in the 80s and 90s, he was ever present in trailer voices and commercial voices too. He's no longer with us. But yes, he used to travel around from studio to studio in a limo. That's how big he was. There's Theo. Happy Tuesday from downtown Chicago, y'all. Callie says, "I agree with you, John. I had a couple of opportunities years ago to do studio sessions. I actually love the excitement and environment of it. Feels very pro." Oh, it totally feels pro. Yeah, because we've seen that for years, people who go into a studio, whether it be music or VO or whatever, where you're in the booth and you've got the engineers and the deciding people or whatever discussing everything. So, um, Wayne says, "IPDTL sounds like a drug ad on the 6 o'clock news." Yep. Yep, it does. All right. Well, guys, I'm going to get to work again, but directed sessions, prepare for it. Be ready. And hopefully you'll get there soon if you haven't already done one. I enjoy them very much. I did one last week. It wasn't Source Connect, it was Microsoft Teams. Oh, which, by the way, if you're not signed up on all those free services like Zoom and Google Meet and Microsoft Teams, go ahead and get signed up. Create an account. It's free. That way you have it if somebody needs it, and you don't have to scramble when the time comes. You're ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna bounce, guys. Once again, I will see you in the morning for another topic, and, until then, break a lip. See you later.